No one will remember your contributions anyway. Those words echo in my head as I walk into the Grand Magnolia Ballroom of the Boston Marriott. My hands tremble slightly, but I grip my leather portfolio tighter, steadying myself. 6 weeks ago, Mark Shields dismissed me over lunch with that cruel parting shot. Today, I'm about to prove him wrong in front of everyone who matters. The room falls silent as I enter with Susan by my side. 52 years old, and this might be the most defining moment of my career. I catch a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrored wall, silver streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, a tailored navy suit that my daughter Kate helped me choose. Power dressing, Mom, she had said. Show them exactly what they threw away. Mark's face pales when he spots me. He's sitting at the head of the table, still playing CO, still pretending he built Harmony Systems from nothing, still lying. I take a deep breath. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. Flashback. The dismissal 6 weeks earlier, I had been summoned to Ristorante Milano, an upscale Italian place where Mark liked to impress clients. I should have known something was wrong when he suggested meeting there instead of our usual conference room. Meg, you've been with us from the early days, Mark began, cutting into his barely touched salmon. His perfectly styled hair caught the restaurant's mood lighting, and he offered that practiced smile that had charmed so many investors. But Harmony Systems is evolving, and we need fresh perspectives. I set down my fork, my mushroom risotto suddenly tasteless. Fresh perspectives? Jason Hunt will be taking over your project starting tomorrow, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the white tablecloth. The severance package is generous, 6 months salary, extended health benefits. Around us, other diners chatted and laughed, completely unaware that my 15-year career was being dismantled between the appetizer and main course. This is about my age, isn't it? I managed to keep my voice steady, though I felt a tremor beginning in my hands. Mark had the decency to look uncomfortable, but only briefly. The industry moves quickly, Meg. We need people who can keep up with current trends. People like Jason? He's barely been out of college for a decade. He brings fresh energy and new methodologies. Mark glanced at his watch. I have another meeting in 20 minutes. HR has prepared everything. The paperwork just needs your signature. I opened the envelope, scanning the legal jargon while my mind raced through implications. Kate's college tuition. My mortgage. Starting over at 52. And after 15 years, that's it? I asked. That's when he said it, with a dismissive wave of his hand. Don't worry, Meg. No one will remember your contributions anyway. I signed the papers with a surprisingly steady hand. Professional to the end, that's me. Walking out of that restaurant, past tables of oblivious diners, I felt invisible. 15 years at Harmony Systems, creating the authentication system that became our flagship product, training countless junior staff, working weekends and holidays to meet deadlines. All erased with a signature and a cruel comment. In my car, I finally let the tears come. But even as I cried, another part of my brain was already calculating, planning. I remembered my sister Jenna's experience. Brilliant engineer, pushed out of her company when it went public, her patents claimed by men who barely understood them. Never again, I whispered, starting the engine. Not to me. Flashback, early warning signs. I should have seen this coming 3 weeks earlier. That's when Mark started bringing Jason to investor meetings. Meetings I had always attended. Jason, with his Stanford MBA and confident pronouncements about system modernization, despite having never built a commercial security platform from scratch. He's just helping with the presentation, David had assured me. David Nowick, our CTO and my direct supervisor, was a technical genius but conflict-averse to a fault. He'd been caught between Mark's ambitions and the engineering team's realities for years. But I didn't trust the situation. That night, I'd stayed late, copying key documentation to my personal drive, not company secrets, but my personal notes, early design drafts, and communications that proved my role in developing the authentication system. The system I'd initially created on weekends in my home office, before Harmony Systems even existed. My father once told me, always keep receipts, Meg. Especially when working with men who wear cufflinks to casual Friday. Dad had worked 30 years at the same engineering firm, only to be pushed aside when younger management took over. His pension was secure, but his dignity wasn't. I called Susan Morrison that same night. We'd become friends years ago when I'd needed legal advice during my divorce. Susan specialized in intellectual property law and had helped numerous women in tech protect their work. Send me everything, she'd said. Let's be prepared just in case. Just in case. Even then, I hadn't truly believed they would actually fire me. At Susan's home, 3 days after my dismissal, I visited Susan's brownstone in Cambridge. Unlike the sterile conference rooms of law firms, her living room felt welcoming. Bookcases lining the walls, family photos mingled with framed newspaper articles about her biggest cases. They picked the wrong woman to underestimate, Susan said, pouring tea into delicate cups that had belonged to her grandmother. At 58, Susan had seen it all in her career. Her silver bob and piercing blue eyes projected both warmth and formidable intelligence. I'm not sure what my options are, I admitted. The severance is decent, but starting over at my age. Let's focus on what we have, Susan said, spreading my files across her coffee table. These GitHub commits clearly show you developed the authentication system before joining Harmony. You mentioned it specifically in your initial employment contract, but Mark never formalized the IP transfer. I remembered that conversation. He dismissed it as unimportant at the time. That oversight might cost him his company now, Susan said with a slight smile. As we reviewed documents, I found myself sharing more than just legal details. After my divorce, I promised Kate I'd always show her what strength looks like, I said, staring into my tea. She was 14 when Tom left, claimed he'd outgrown our marriage. Found himself a 28-year-old yoga instructor. Men and their predictable midlife crises, Susan sighed. My ex-husband bought a motorcycle and broke his collarbone 2 weeks later. I laughed despite myself. I worked so hard to keep our house, to pay for Kate's education without Tom's help. I thought Harmony was my security. Susan nodded. Mark probably counted on that fear, that at your age, you wouldn't risk unemployment. She was right. Mark came from family money, had never known real financial insecurity. His father owned a successful construction company. Mark had attended private schools and Ivy League universities. He'd never had to worry about healthcare coverage or mortgage payments. What's our strategy? I asked. We wait, Susan replied. They'll realize very quickly that they can't maintain your system without you. When they call, and they will, we'll be ready. At the park. The phone call 2 weeks later, I was sitting on a park bench with Kate, who had come home for the weekend from college. We'd been shopping for her spring semester textbooks and stopped to rest with coffee from a nearby cafe. I'm proud of you, Mom, Kate said, her dark hair, so like mine before the gray appeared, blowing in the spring breeze. Most people would be falling apart. Oh, I did my falling apart, I admitted. Just not where Mark could see it. Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew, Kate said. It was about the only thing he got right. My phone rang. David Nowick's name flashed on the screen. Kate raised an eyebrow. Company calling already? I nodded, answering with a deliberately casual, "Hello, David." His voice sounded strained, almost panicked. Meg, we have a situation. The authentication system is showing critical errors after Jason implemented some improvements. 3 major clients are threatening to pull their contracts. That sounds challenging, I replied calmly, winking at Kate. We need your help. Mark has authorized me to offer you a consulting contract. Very generous terms. Consulting? I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. David cleared his throat. Look, between us, Jason is completely out of his depth. Your documentation is, well, it's not exactly user-friendly for someone who didn't design the system. I'd created thorough documentation, but in my own shorthand, with notes that made perfect sense to me and absolutely no one else. Not an accident. I appreciate the offer, David, but I'm quite busy with other opportunities right now. Kate's eyes widened as she listened to my side of the conversation. Meg, please. David's voice dropped to a near whisper. Mark doesn't know I'm calling. We can double the consulting rate. Whatever you want. Please convey my best wishes to the team. Perhaps Jason's extensive experience will help him solve the problem. After ending the call, Kate burst out laughing. Mom, you're actually enjoying this, aren't you? For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. Maybe a little. At the cafe, meeting with Helen, the following week brought another unexpected development. The Bell Jar was an old-fashioned cafe that had somehow survived in downtown Boston despite the encroachment of chain coffee shops. I'd suggested meeting here because it was far from Harmony's offices and any tech industry haunts. Helen Fisher sat across from me, elegant in a simple gray pantsuit, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob. At 60, she commanded respect without demanding it, the result of decades as one of the few women in venture capital. Thank you for meeting me, Meg, she said after ordering chamomile tea. This isn't exactly protocol, but these are unusual circumstances. How can I help you, Miss Fisher? I asked, though I had a good idea why the lead investor of Harmony Systems wanted to meet privately. Please, call me Helen. She stirred honey into her tea. I've been reviewing some concerning reports about Harmony's technical stability. The authentication system that was presented as the company's core innovation is failing, and apparently, the team can't fix it. I nodded but said nothing. What's more troubling, Helen continued, is that I've discovered significant discrepancies in what we were told about the system's development. Mark presented himself as the architectural visionary. I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. Is that what he told you? Helen's eyes narrowed slightly. You know, my first technology investment was in 1989. The company founders showed me a groundbreaking circuit design. I later discovered a female engineer had created it, but was credited only as a technical assistant. What happened? I asked. I pulled my investment and funded her directly instead, Helen replied. She now runs a company valued at over $200 million. She leaned forward. Meg, the shareholders are meeting tomorrow. Mark doesn't know I'm here, but I'd like you to attend that meeting. Tell your side of the story. That's a significant request, I said cautiously. I know, but we invested in Harmony based partly on false premises. We need to correct that. I'd need to bring my attorney. Helen nodded. Of course. This isn't about ambushing anyone. It's about transparency. As she left, she paused. You know, I was pushed out of my first firm at 52, told I couldn't connect with younger entrepreneurs. 5 years later, I founded my own venture capital firm specializing in overlooked founders. Sometimes what seems like an ending is actually a beginning. The confrontation, shareholders meeting, and now here I am, walking into the shareholders meeting with Susan beside me. The room falls silent as we enter. Mark attempts to control the narrative. Miss Forrester is here as a courtesy to address some technical questions. Actually, Helen interrupts. I invited Meg to share some important information relevant to our current situation. For the next 20 minutes, I methodically present my evidence. GitHub repositories showing my development of the authentication system predating my employment, emails where Mark acknowledged this but never formalized the IP transfer, investor presentations where he claimed credit for my work. These slides from the series, A Funding Round, highlight the authentication system as Harmony's key competitive advantage, I explain, displaying the documents on the projection screen. You'll notice my name isn't mentioned once, despite me being the principal architect. Robert Chen, another investor, removes his glasses. Mark, you represented yourself as the technical visionary behind these systems. I supervise their development, Mark insists, his confident facade beginning to crack. Supervision isn't creation, I counter. And your supervision mainly consisted of setting unrealistic deadlines while taking credit for the results. David, who has been silent until now, clears his throat. I can confirm that Meg was the principal architect. Without her, we can't maintain it properly, as the past few weeks have demonstrated. Mark's face reddens. This is absurd. She's holding the company hostage. No, Mark, I say quietly. I'm simply ensuring that the truth is recognized. The meeting stretches for 3 more hours. Susan outlines our terms. Proper recognition of my contributions, compensation for my intellectual property, and guarantees against future misrepresentation. When the board returns from a private discussion, Helen addresses the room. We're initiating an immediate leadership change. Mark, there have been serious misrepresentations under your leadership. Mark stands abruptly. You can't be serious. I built this company. With Meg's technology, Robert adds pointedly. Helen continues. We're offering Meg a position as Chief Technology Officer, with appropriate equity compensation and full recognition of her contributions. As Mark storms out, slamming the door behind him, I feel no triumph, only validation. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. Epilogue. 6 months later, Foster Solutions reads the sign above our new office. The opening reception is modest but warm, filled with people who believe in what we're building. Kate helps arrange refreshments, home from college for the weekend. Susan chats with Helen in the corner. They've become friends through this journey. Karen Lee, who left Harmony to join my new venture, shows a potential client our security platform. Mom, I can't believe you did all this in 6 months, Kate says, pride evident in her voice. I had a head start, I tell her. And good people supporting me. My phone buzzes with a new email. It's from Mark. Meg, I owe you an apology. I should have valued your contributions instead of trying to diminish them. The company is better off without me. I'm starting over with some hard-earned lessons about giving credit where it's due. Mark, I consider how to respond, then types simply, Mark, thank you for the apology. I wish you success in your future endeavors. Meg important? Kate asks, nodding toward my phone. I put it away. Just closing a chapter. Later, as we're locking up, Kate says, You know, watching you stand up for yourself changed how I see my future. I used to worry about getting older in this industry, but now I see that experience isn't something to hide. It's your superpower. She hugs me tightly. No one will forget your contributions now, Mom. And that, I realize, is the greatest victory of all. Your father and I are moving in with you next week, my mother announced over dinner, her tone making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. We'll take your master bedroom, of course. And yes, you'll still need to keep sending Melissa the $1,500 every month. My fork clattered against the plate. At 48 years old, I suddenly felt like a teenager again, powerless, voiceless, trapped. My sister Melissa smirked from across the table, while her husband Mark nodded approvingly. Their teenage children, Jessica and Brian, didn't even look up from their phones. I stared at my mother, Elizabeth, her perfectly coiffed gray hair and erect posture befitting her 73 years of ruling our family with unwavering authority. My father, Richard, avoided my gaze, studying his plate with sudden interest. But that's my home, I finally managed to say, my voice embarrassingly small. I've been saving for years to buy my own condo. If I keep paying for Melissa's family and now support you both too, I'll have nothing left for retirement. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother laughed, actually laughed, as if I told a mildly amusing joke. Oh, Carol, she said, patting my hand condescendingly. Family requires sacrifices. Surely you don't expect your sister to manage on her own? And we've already decided to give them our house. I stood up so abruptly my chair nearly toppled over. I need some air, I mumbled, and fled to the porch. Outside in the crisp November air, I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. For 25 years since college, I'd been the reliable one, the good daughter, the family ATM. Now, approaching 50 with my retirement savings dwindling, I faced a choice that would change everything. That night, I would make the first truly selfish decision of my adult life. Flashback, the beginning of dependency. 8 months earlier, I'd arrived at my parents' house for our monthly Sunday dinner, blissfully unaware of the trap being set. I'd brought a bottle of wine, a small extravagance from my modest accounting manager's salary. Back then, I still had dreams of buying my own condominium by 50. I'd even met with a financial advisor who assured me I was on track if I maintained my savings rate. Carol, we need to discuss something important, Mom had announced after dinner, using her former high school teacher's voice that brooked no argument. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Melissa and Mark are having some financial difficulties. I remember thinking they meant a one-time loan. Perhaps a few $100s to tide them over until Mark's real estate business picked up again. After all, that's what family was for, right? We'll be giving them $1,000 a month, Mom continued, and you'll be contributing $1,500. The wine turned sour in my mouth. $1,500? Every month? That's nearly a third of my take-home pay. My children need stability, Melissa interjected, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. Private school isn't cheap, and Mark's business is just going through a temporary downturn. A temporary downturn that had lasted their entire 20-year marriage, I thought but didn't say. I have my own expenses, I protested weakly. My retirement savings. Retirement? Mom scoffed. You're only 48, and it's not like you have a family to support. There it was, the familiar sting. My choice to focus on my career rather than marriage was regularly wielded as evidence of my lesser worth in the family hierarchy. I should have said no, but a lifetime of being the responsible one, the peacekeeper, the good daughter who never caused trouble, won out. How long will this arrangement last? I asked instead. The vague answer should have been my first warning. At the apartment, the decision, I slammed my apartment door so hard a framed photo fell from the wall. The glass cracked diagonally across my sister's smiling face. How fitting. My hands shook as I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial spreadsheets. The cold, hard numbers confirmed what I already knew. If my parents moved in and I continued supporting Melissa's family, my retirement savings would be depleted within 5 years. I'd be approaching 60 with nothing. 50 years old and still living as if my life belongs to everyone but me, I whispered to the empty room. I remembered my father in his banking days, always telling clients to pay yourself first. Yet he'd stood by while I was expected to sacrifice my future for my sister's present. Why was I always the one expected to give? Growing up, Melissa had gotten the bigger bedroom, the newer clothes, the lavish sweet 16 party. When she married Mark at 22, too young, too impulsive, our parents threw them a wedding that emptied their savings. When I earned my MBA with honors at 26, I got a card and dinner at Olive Garden. You're so strong, Carol, Mom would say whenever I achieved something. Not emotional like your sister. As if my strength was a convenient tool for the family rather than my own achievement. I opened my banking app and stared at the recurring transfer to Melissa's account. 8 months of watching my dreams shrink while they posted photos of restaurant meals and new gadgets for the kids on social media. 8 months of eating microwave dinners and declining invitations from colleagues to save money. Enough. I reached for my phone and called my landlord, Jim. Carol. How's my favorite tenant? His gravelly voice was oddly comforting. Jim, I need help. My family is. I took a deep breath. They're planning to move into my apartment without my permission. I need to break my lease. There was a long pause. Well, that's a new one, he finally said. Are we talking about a visit or they're giving their house to my sister and planning to live with me permanently? Taking my bedroom. Expecting me to cover all expenses. Jim whistled low. At your age? That's not right. I know. I'm desperate. What if? He hesitated. I have another property across town. Similar rent, maybe a bit smaller. But they wouldn't know where to find you. My heart raced. Was I really considering this? Sneaking away from my own family like a thief in the night? I thought of my financial advisor's concerned face at our last meeting. Carol, at this rate, you won't have enough to retire until you're 75. Is supporting your sister's family really your responsibility? I'll take it, I told Jim. How soon can I move in? Flashback the pattern. The pattern had been set long before I could recognize it. When I was 10 and Melissa 13, she'd wanted a new bicycle, a purple 10-speed with handlebar streamers. It was expensive, beyond our middle-class means. Dad, still an assistant bank manager then, had gently explained they couldn't afford it. Melissa had cried for 3 days. Not just quiet tears, but dramatic, heaving sobs that echoed through our small house. Mom, herself a teacher trained to respond to the child showing the most distress, had eventually convinced Dad to use the money they'd been saving for our summer vacation. I didn't complain when our beach trip was canceled. I was the easy child, the one who understood, who didn't make waves. Why is Carol so quiet? Relatives would ask at family gatherings, as if my self-containment was a defect rather than a survival strategy. By the time I was in high school, the dynamic was firmly established. Melissa's needs were emergencies. Mine were afterthoughts. When I won a partial scholarship to college, Mom's first response was, "That's good. Now we can help Melissa with her dance lessons." I'd built my career methodically, working my way up from entry-level accountant to department manager. Every promotion met with the same response from my family. A distracted, "That's nice, dear," before returning attention to whatever crisis Melissa was navigating. Now, at 48, I was still playing my assigned role in the family drama. But tonight, for the first time, I was going to rewrite my part. The escape, breaking free. The next morning, I took a personal day from work, something I'd done perhaps 3 times in my 20-year career. I met Jim at his office at 8 a.m. sharp. "You're sure about this?" he asked as I signed the new lease. I nodded, surprising myself with my certainty. "More sure than I've been about anything in years." Jim slid the keys across his desk. "It's Unit 304. Building has good security. No one gets in without a resident buzzing them up." I thanked him, then asked the question that had kept me awake all night. "What will you tell my parents when they show up?" Jim leaned back in his chair, his weathered face thoughtful. "The truth. That you no longer live there. I don't have to tell them anything else." I called a moving company that advertised same-day service, paying extra for the rush job. By 6 p.m., I was in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes but filled with an unfamiliar sensation: freedom. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "We're loading the car with our first batch of things. See you in about an hour." I didn't respond. For the first time in my adult life, I was choosing myself. 2 hours later, my phone exploded with calls. I let the first few go to voicemail, hands shaking but resolve firm. When I finally answered, Mom was already mid-sentence, her voice shrill with indignation. "Absolutely unacceptable. Where are you?" "There's some man at your apartment saying you don't live there anymore." "That's my landlord," I said calmly. "And he's right." I moved. The silence that followed was so profound I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then came the explosion. "You what?" Mom's voice rose to a pitch I hadn't heard since I'd accidentally broken her favorite vase at 12. "How could you do this to us? We're standing here with our belongings. Where are we supposed to go?" "Back to your house," I suggested. "The one you still own." Dad came on the line, his voice tight with rare anger. "Carol, this is irresponsible. Give us your new address immediately." "No," I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. "I'm not giving anyone my new address because you're not moving in with me. After everything we've done for you." Mom was back, her voice catching theatrically. "You can't just abandon your family like this." The accusation ignited something in me. "Abandon you? You were going to take my bedroom. You were planning to drain what's left of my retirement savings. You never once considered what I wanted or how I felt." "You never have." "That's not true." Dad protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is true," I said, no longer shouting but speaking with quiet intensity. "Everything has always been about what Melissa wants, what Melissa needs. I'm done being the family ATM. We're your parents," Mom said, her voice wobbling between anger and tears. "You can't just cut us off like this." "I'm not cutting you off. I'm setting boundaries. When you learn to respect them, we can talk." I ended the call before they could respond, then immediately blocked both their numbers. My hand was still on the phone when it rang again. "Melissa. What the hell is wrong with you?" She screeched without preamble. "Mom and Dad are coming back to our house now. This is so unfair. You need to take them." "No," I said, my voice firm. "And effective immediately, I'm no longer sending you money each month. You can't do that." Her voice rose to a panicked pitch. "We depend on that money. The kid's tuition is due next week. Maybe Mark should take that accounting job he was offered instead of chasing real estate commissions. Or you could work full-time instead of part-time." "You selfish bitch," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." I laughed then, a genuine laugh of liberation. "What exactly have you done for me, Melissa? Name one thing." Her silence was answer enough. I hung up, blocked her number, and canceled the automatic transfer to her account. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, the good kind I usually couldn't afford, and looked around my new apartment. Boxes everywhere. Nothing organized, but it was mine. My space, my money, my life. For the first time in decades, I felt like I could breathe. The aftermath. Standing firm. The fallout was immediate and extensive. Within days, a parade of relatives began calling: my mother's sister, my father's brother, even distant cousins I hardly knew. Each conversation followed the same awkward script: forced casual chit-chat that inevitably steered toward my new address. "Mom and Dad are just worried about you," my Aunt Sarah tried, her voice honeyed with false concern. "They're worried about their plans being ruined," I corrected her. "I'm perfectly fine." The calls eventually stopped, but the surveillance began. One Tuesday evening, as I left work, I spotted my parents' blue Subaru parked across from the office building. I pretended not to notice, walking calmly to my car while formulating a plan. I drove directly to the Westfield Mall, occasionally checking my rearview mirror. Yes, they were following at a distance, the blue Subaru hanging back several cars but unmistakably there. When I pulled into the mall parking lot, they found a spot with a clear view of my car. Inside, I called my friend Diane. "My parents are literally stalking me," I explained. "They followed me to the mall, and they're watching my car. Can you pick me up at the north exit?" "Holy shit, Carol," Diane said, half laughing, half concerned. "Are you serious? You're almost 50. Apparently that doesn't matter to them. I'll be there in 15. This is better than my evening plans of watching reality TV, that's for sure." I browsed stores for an hour, occasionally peeking out to see my parents still stationed by my car. When Diane texted her arrival, I slipped out the north exit. "Get in, we're escaping the world's oldest helicopter parents," she said as I climbed into her car. We burst into laughter that had an edge of hysteria. "I can't believe this is my life," I said once I caught my breath. "My own parents are stalking me. Have you considered a restraining order?" Diane asked, only half joking. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," I said, though the thought had crossed my mind. The surveillance attempts continued for weeks. My parents tried following me from work twice more. They enlisted more relatives to call with increasingly transparent excuses. Each time, I held firm. Eventually, the attempt stopped. The silence felt strange at first, but quickly became liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly anxious about family obligations or unexpected financial demands. I started putting the $1,500 I used to send Melissa into my retirement account each month. I joined a book club without worrying about being called away for a family emergency. I bought a comfortable new couch without feeling guilty for wasting money on myself. I was happy, genuinely, contentedly happy. Flashback, the seeds of change. Looking back, there were moments when I could have changed our family dynamic, tiny windows of opportunity I was too conditioned to recognize. When I was 35 and received a significant promotion, Dad had taken me aside at a family dinner. "I'm proud of you, Carol," he said quietly, his eyes sincere. "You've built something substantial on your own." Instead of accepting his praise, I deflected. "It's nothing special. Just doing my job." Why had I minimized my own achievements? Perhaps because acknowledging my success meant confronting the unfairness that despite my hard work, Melissa would always be the emotional center of our family universe. There was also the time Mom had called me in tears after Melissa and Mark had another financial crisis. "I don't know what to do anymore," she confessed. "They never learn." That had been a moment to suggest boundaries, to help my parents see the enabling pattern. Instead, I'd comforted her and later sent Melissa money to help out, reinforcing the very cycle that was draining us all. Now I wondered, had my compliance been as much a problem as their demands? By never saying no, had I helped create the very situation I resented? These questions lingered as December arrived, bringing with it the inevitable holiday complications. The reconciliation, on my terms. 2 weeks before Christmas, an email arrived from Mom. "Carol, I hope this email finds you well. It's been several months since we last spoke, and your father and I have had a lot of time to reflect on our actions. We realize now that we overstepped boundaries and didn't consider your feelings. For that, we are truly sorry. Melissa wanted me to tell you that she's taken a full-time position at the elementary school as an administrative assistant. Mark has accepted a staff accounting position with a steady salary. They're managing their finances independently now. Your father and I are still in our house. After you left, we realized how unreasonable our expectations were. We should never have tried to force ourselves into your life that way. We would very much like to see you this Christmas. Nothing fancy, just family dinner at our house. No demands, no expectations. We miss you, Carol. We'd like a chance to make things right. You don't need to respond right away. Love, Mom. I read the email 3 times, not quite believing what I was seeing. An apology from my mother? Melissa and Mark with steady jobs. Was this a genuine olive branch or another manipulation tactic? After a lifetime of being the less favored child, of having my boundaries trampled and my generosity exploited, could I trust this sudden change of heart? I closed my laptop without responding. I needed time to think. That night, I dreamed of childhood Christmases. Melissa ripping open mountains of presents while I carefully unwrapped my much smaller pile. Mom beaming when Melissa hugged her, but barely noticing when I did the same. The constant comparison. The persistent feeling that I was somehow less worthy of love and attention. But I also remembered moments of genuine connection. Dad teaching me to balance a checkbook with patient pride. Mom making my favorite soup when I had bronchitis at 15. The rare afternoons when Melissa and I got along, sharing secrets and giggling together before our relationship soured. Were those moments enough to build a new relationship on? Could we ever have a healthy family dynamic, or would I always be the afterthought, the backup plan, the walking ATM? I didn't have answers. All I knew was that I'd found my strength, my voice, my boundaries. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't lose those again. After days of deliberation, I wrote a simple reply. Mom, I'll come for Christmas dinner. What time should I be there? My mother's response came within the hour. Carol, we're so happy you're coming. Dinner will be at 5. Your father is making his special prime rib. Just bring yourself. No gifts necessary. Love, Mom. The no gifts necessary part caught my attention. Usually, our family made a big deal about expensive presents, especially for Melissa's children. This was different. Christmas Day. A new beginning. Christmas Day arrived cold and clear. I dressed in a sweater I loved. Not the one Melissa had once commented made me look, at least professional, with that familiar hint of condescension. I drove to my parents' house with a knot in my stomach, rehearsing responses to potential provocations. If they asked about my finances, I'm focusing on my retirement planning right now. If they pressured me about my address, I'm happy with my living situation and prefer to keep it private. If they criticized my life choices, I appreciate your concern, but I'm comfortable with my decisions. I pulled into the driveway, took a deep breath, and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open. Mom stood there looking somehow smaller than I remembered, less the imposing former teacher and more just a woman in her 70s. She stepped forward and hugged me, not the perfunctory embrace I was used to, but a real hug, tight and lingering. I stood stiffly for a moment before cautiously returning it. Inside, the house smelled like prime rib and pine. Dad appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. There she is, he said, smiling hesitantly. He too embraced me, patting my back awkwardly. Merry Christmas, kiddo. Where are Melissa and the family? I asked, glancing around the suspiciously quiet house. They'll be here at 5, Mom explained. We asked you to come early. We wanted some time just with you. This was definitely new. I followed them to the living room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace and 3 mugs of hot chocolate waited on the coffee table. Carol, Dad began once we were seated. We owe you an apology. A real one, not just an email. I nodded, waiting. We've been unfair to you, Mom continued. For a long time. Not just with the housing situation. She looked down at her hands, now spotted with age. We favored Melissa. We've taken you for granted. We've treated you like your only value to this family was financial. Why? I asked simply. It was the question I'd wanted to ask my entire life. My parents exchanged glances. Melissa was always more demanding, Dad explained. She needed more attention, more help. You were so independent, so capable. We leaned on you because you seemed like you could handle it. We mistook your strength for immunity to being hurt, Mom added. That was wrong of us. I sipped my hot chocolate, processing their words. And Melissa? Has she had a similar epiphany? They exchanged another look. She's working on it, Dad said. Having a steady job has been good for her. For both of them, really. We talked for over an hour. Really talked in a way we never had before. They asked about my work, my friends, my new apartment, though they didn't press for the address. I found myself slowly relaxing, cautiously optimistic. At 5, the doorbell rang. Melissa, Mark, and the kids had arrived. I braced myself for the old dynamic to resurface. Melissa entered first, the teenagers trailing behind her. Her eyes found mine immediately. Carol, she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, I replied neutrally. An awkward silence fell. Then, to my complete shock, Melissa stepped forward and hugged me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I've been a terrible sister. I froze, completely unprepared for this. Melissa had never apologized to me for anything in her entire life. Thank you for saying that, I managed. Dinner was surreal. Melissa talked about her job with genuine enthusiasm. Mark discussed his new position without a single mention of getting rich quick. The kids were reasonably well behaved, and when Jessica spilled her drink, Melissa cleaned it up herself instead of expecting Mom or me to do it. No one asked me for money. No one made passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. No one tried to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. After dinner, as we exchanged the modest gifts we'd all brought, I found myself laughing genuinely at Dad's corny jokes, accepting Mom's compliments without searching for hidden barbs, and actually enjoying my niece and nephew's conversation. As I prepared to leave, Mom walked me to the door. Will you come for New Year's? She asked tentatively. I hesitated. One good evening didn't erase decades of being treated as an afterthought. Trust would take time to rebuild. Let me think about it, I said honestly. She nodded, accepting my boundary without protest. Another good sign. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. The evening had gone well, suspiciously well. A cynical part of me wondered if it was all an act, if they would revert to form once they thought I was back in the fold. Only time would tell. But for now, I was proud of myself for coming, for facing them on my terms. Whether a relationship could be truly repaired remained to be seen, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never again be the family doormat. At 48, I had finally found my voice. Perhaps life really does begin at 50. You've made your point. Walk away now if you know what's good for you. The text message glowed on my phone screen, its anonymous sender somehow more menacing for their lack of identity. I stared at it for a long moment, my reflection visible in the darkened screen when it finally went to sleep, a 52-year-old woman with tired eyes and a neat bun that didn't have a single hair out of place, even now. 3 weeks ago, I had been Margaret Maggie Sullivan, respected finance director at Fairview Holdings. Now I was Maggie Sullivan, whistleblower. Target. I took a screenshot of the threat and forwarded it to my attorney, Sarah Goldman. This wasn't just cooking books anymore. I had stumbled onto something bigger, something that powerful people would threaten me to keep hidden. The journalist sitting across from me at the cafe, Michael Reynolds, watched with undisguised curiosity. What was that? He asked, his eyes darting between my face and my phone. Confirmation, I replied, placing the phone face down on the table. That I'm looking in exactly the right place. Flashback, the breaking point. 3 weeks earlier, I sat across from Richard Parker in Fairview Holdings' executive conference room. Light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished oak table between us, a table where I'd spent countless hours reviewing financial reports, suggesting improvements, helping build this company into something I had once been proud of. You're either a team player or you're gone, Maggie, Richard said, his voice slicing through the silence. He slid the termination papers across the table with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Your choice. I'd seen that smile before. My father had worked for 30 years at a manufacturing plant before being discarded when cheaper labor became available overseas. I remember his stunned expression when he came home that day, termination papers in hand. He'd given everything to that company, including his health. 6 months later, he was gone. A heart attack, they called it. But my mother and I knew better. It was a broken heart. That memory had stayed with me throughout my 30 years in accounting. It had shaped my professional ethics, my determination to stand up for what was right, regardless of pressure. It was the story I'd told my son Ryan when he was young, explaining why integrity mattered more than money. I won't falsify financial statements for the audit, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Not for you. Not for anyone. Richard's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Then I believe we're done here. Without another word, I signed the termination papers. No arguments, no pleas, no emotional outbursts. I simply picked up my pen and signed away 30 years of my career at Fairview Holdings. As security escorted me to clear out my desk, I felt the eyes of my colleagues following me through the open plan office. Some looked away, too uncomfortable to witness my disgrace. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. My assistant, Jessica Martinez, approached with tears in her eyes, but security stepped between us. Personal items only, the guard instructed as I emptied my desk drawer. I nodded, carefully placing framed photos, including one of Ryan at his high school graduation, my coffee mug, and a few books into a cardboard box. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment. For months, I had been documenting every questionable directive, archiving incriminating emails, and taking screenshots of Slack conversations where executives discussed massaging the numbers and creative accounting for the upcoming audit. At the apartment, the war room, my downtown Hartford condo had always been my sanctuary, but that night it felt more like a war room. Spread across my dining table were printed copies of emails, financial statements, and meeting notes, physical backups of the digital trail I had meticulously preserved. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the city lights. The skyline of Hartford stretched before me, gleaming office buildings housing countless businesses. How many other companies were hiding similar secrets behind their gleaming windows? How many other accountants were facing the same impossible choice I had faced today? My phone rang, startling me. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. My son always seemed to have a sixth sense for when something was wrong. I took a deep breath before answering. Hey, Mom, his voice came through, warm and concerned. Just checking in. You usually call on Wednesdays, but I didn't hear from you today. I hesitated, not wanting to burden him with my problems while he was focusing on his studies at Massachusetts University. I'm fine, honey. Just a busy day. Mom, he said, his tone making it clear he wasn't buying it. What's wrong? Did something happen at work? I sighed, moving back inside to sit on the couch. I'm not at Fairview anymore, Ryan. As of today, the silence on the other end lasted a few seconds. They fired you? For what? For refusing to do something I knew was wrong. I kept my explanation simple, not wanting to get into the technical details of accounting fraud. Are you okay? Do you need me to come home? I can be there by tomorrow afternoon. His immediate offer to drop everything and come to me brought tears to my eyes, tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed all day. No, sweetheart. I'm okay. Really. What are you going to do? He asked. I glanced at my dining table covered with evidence. I'm going to do the right thing, I said. Just like I always taught you to do. Even when it's hard? He responded, echoing the words I'd said to him countless times throughout his childhood. Especially when it's hard, I finished. After a moment, he said softly, Mom, I know you'll do the right thing. You always have. Those words settled something inside me. After we hung up, I returned to my dining table and pulled up the email I had drafted earlier that day, addressed to all 7 members of Fairview Holdings Board of Directors. I had crafted it carefully, no emotional language, no accusations, Just the facts laid bare with dozens of attachments proving systematic financial misrepresentation ordered by Chief Financial Officer Richard Parker and supported by Chief Executive Officer James Harrison. The decision and its aftermath. My finger hovered over the send button as doubt crept in. Was I really prepared for the fallout? Once I pressed send, there would be no going back. I would be branded a whistleblower, respected by some, reviled by others. At 52, starting over wouldn't be easy. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. They're saying you resigned because you couldn't handle the pressure. Parker already interviewed your replacement. I felt a flare of anger, quickly replaced by resolve. Richard Parker had always underestimated me. He saw me as just another accountant, excellent with numbers but easy to intimidate. He didn't understand that precision and attention to detail weren't just professional skills for me. They were the foundation of who I was. I hit send. Within minutes, my email was sitting in the inboxes of not only the board of directors, but also Fairview's external auditors and legal counsel. The truth was out, and now all I could do was wait. I picked up the framed photo of Ryan and studied it. He had my eyes but his father's smile. Brian and I had been divorced for 8 years now, but our son remained the best thing we had ever done together. Life isn't a balance sheet, Maggie, Brian had said during our last argument. Perhaps he was right about life, but in accounting, precision was everything. And right now, precision was my only weapon. 6 years ago, I had joined Fairview Holdings with such optimism. The company had been smaller then, more focused on ethical investments and affordable housing developments. Over time, as profit margins became the only metric that mattered, something fundamental had changed. 3 months ago, when Richard first suggested adjusting our debt-to-equity ratios to attract a particular investor, I had expressed concern. He had laughed it off as standard industry practice. 2 months ago, when he instructed me to reclassify certain expenses to inflate our quarterly earnings report, I documented the conversation and quietly began gathering evidence. 1 month ago, when he ordered me to create a shell subsidiary to hide underperforming assets before the audit, I knew my days at Fairview were numbered. I just hadn't expected the end to come quite so abruptly. The response was faster than I anticipated. By 8 a.m. the next morning, I had received calls from 3 board members, including Chairwoman Catherine Montgomery, who had always struck me as the most ethically minded of the leadership team. "We've called an emergency board meeting for noon," she informed me, her voice grave. "The evidence you've provided is concerning, to say the least. Would you be willing to join us via conference call?" The confrontation. "The board has reviewed your materials, Ms. Sullivan," Catherine began after introductions were complete. "We've also spoken with our legal counsel about next steps. But before we proceed, we'd like to hear directly from you about what transpired." For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through everything, from the first subtle suggestions to polish the numbers to the explicit demands to falsify data. I detailed Richard's growing pressure and eventual ultimatum that led to my termination. "And you have documentation for all of this?" asked board member Gregory Patel, his tone skeptical. "Every instance is documented with emails, meeting notes, or recorded conversations in accordance with Connecticut's one-party consent laws," I confirmed. "I've been in accounting for 30 years, Mr. Patel. I understand the importance of evidence." The silence that followed told me everything. They believed me. But more importantly, they knew I had them cornered. If they didn't act on this information, they would be complicit. "Thank you for your candor, Ms. Sullivan," Catherine finally said. "Please keep your phone nearby. Our legal team will be in touch." 3 hours later, I received an email notification for an urgent press release from Fairview Holdings. The statement announced the immediate suspension of Richard Parker and CEO James Harrison pending a full independent investigation into alleged financial improprieties. The company had also self-reported to the Securities and Exchange Commission and would be cooperating fully with any regulatory inquiries. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Jessica. "The office is in chaos," she whispered. "Security just escorted Parker and Harrison out of the building. People are saying the feds might get involved." "Maggie, what did you do?" "I told the truth," I said simply. The meeting and the trap. The following morning, Fairview Holdings stock had dropped nearly 15% by the time I arrived for my meeting with Catherine Montgomery. The lobby of the company's headquarters, normally bustling with activity, was eerily quiet except for a few reporters lingering outside hoping to catch an insider for comment. Security brought me directly to the executive floor, the same floor I had been escorted from in disgrace just 2 days earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. Catherine was waiting in the boardroom alongside two individuals she introduced as Terrence Walker from the firm's legal department and Josephine Alvarez, an attorney from an external law firm specializing in corporate compliance. "Thank you for coming, Maggie," Catherine began. "We've initiated a full-scale independent investigation, but the board felt it important to hear your perspective on how widespread these issues might be." Before we begin, Josephine interjected, "I want to clarify that Ms. Sullivan is here voluntarily and should be treated as a whistleblower protected under federal law, not as a hostile party." I appreciated the attorney's directness, though I suspected her concern was more about limiting Fairview's liability than protecting me. "Of course," Catherine agreed smoothly. "Maggie, we value your 30 years of experience in financial compliance and hope you can help us understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." For the next hour, I walked them through the evolution of the accounting irregularities. How they had started small but grown increasingly brazen as external financial pressures mounted on the company. I explained how Richard had compartmentalized the deceptive practices, ensuring that different team members worked on isolated pieces so that no one besides him had the complete picture. No one except me, that is. As finance director, I was the nexus through which all financial information flowed. "How many others do you believe were knowingly involved?" Terrence asked, taking careful notes. "Based on direct evidence, I can only confirm Richard Parker and James Harrison," I replied. "Several others may have suspected, but Richard was careful to maintain plausible deniability for most of the team." Catherine leaned forward. "Maggie, I'm going to be blunt. The board is prepared to offer you reinstatement with a substantial promotion and compensation increase. We need someone with your ethical standards and institutional knowledge to help us correct course." The offer caught me off guard. I had expected legal threats or perhaps a severance package with strings attached. Not this. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure returning is the right move for either of us." Catherine looked surprised. She clearly wasn't accustomed to having her offers rejected. "May I ask why?" "The compensation would be quite generous." I thought of my father. I thought of Ryan. I thought of everything I had ever taught my son about integrity. "Because the problems at Fairview go deeper than Richard and James," I said. "The board has received quarterly reports for years. You approved executive bonuses tied to financial metrics that, in retrospect, were clearly implausible. Either the board failed in its fiduciary duty of oversight, or some of you were aware and chose to look the other way." The room fell silent. Josephine shifted uncomfortably, while Terrence stopped writing entirely. "That's a serious allegation," Catherine finally said, her voice tight. "It's an observation based on the financial data, which is my area of expertise," I replied. "And it's why I believe my credibility as a whistleblower would be compromised if I returned to Fairview's parole." As the meeting concluded without resolution, I noticed a notification on my phone, an email from the Securities and Exchange Commission requesting an interview. The federal investigation was officially underway, and I had just declined the company's attempt to bring me back into the fold. Walking out of Fairview for what I now knew would be the last time, I felt lighter. The path ahead was uncertain, but at least it was my own. The wider web present day, which brings me back to the cafe, the thread on my phone, and the journalist sitting across from me. Sorry, Maggie," Michael corrected himself, his pen poised over his notepad. "You're comfortable with me quoting you directly on the timeline of events leading to your termination?" I nodded, scanning the latest draft of his article on his tablet. "Everything attributed to me is accurate. But remember our agreement. This interview is about corporate accountability, not personal vendettas." "Absolutely," he agreed, taking back the tablet, "though readers love a personal angle. Any interest in sharing how it felt to watch Fairview stock drop 30% since the scandal broke?" I sipped my coffee, considering my response carefully. "I take no pleasure in watching a company I helped build suffer, Michael. Many honest employees are now facing uncertainty because of decisions made by a few. He looked disappointed but made a note. Fair enough. What about the second investigation? Sources tell me you've had multiple interviews with federal regulators. I can't comment on an ongoing investigation, I replied, the answer practiced and precise. Our conversation was interrupted by an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Maggie Sullivan speaking, I said, excusing myself from the table. Ms. Sullivan, this is David Chen, Chief Compliance Officer at Thornmere Financial. The name of one of Fairview's largest competitors immediately caught my attention. I was hoping we might meet to discuss an opportunity. I scheduled a meeting for the following day and returned to Michael, who was watching me with undisguised curiosity. Another job offer? He asked. That's the third one I've seen you take since we sat down. It was true. In the weeks since the scandal broke, I had received inquiries from multiple companies seeking financial compliance leadership. My reputation as the whistleblower who took down Fairview's executive team had made me simultaneously radioactive and highly desirable, depending on a company's priorities. Would you believe me if I said it was a cold call about my car's extended warranty? I joked. Michael laughed. Not for a second. His expression turned more serious. Maggie, there's something you should know before this article goes to print. I've uncovered evidence suggesting that Fairview's fraudulent practices may have direct connections to Redwood Capital Partners. I felt my blood run cold. Redwood was one of the largest private equity firms in the Northeast, with tentacles reaching into dozens of companies across multiple industries. What kind of connections? I asked, keeping my voice level. Financial flows that don't make sense, overlapping board memberships, and remarkably similar accounting irregularities, he explained. I think Fairview might be just the tip of the iceberg. If Michael was right, my actions had potentially uncovered something much bigger than one company's financial misdeeds. It also meant that some very powerful people might have reason to be concerned about what I knew or what I might discover. That's when the threatening text had arrived. The choice. The offices of Thornmere Financial occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown tower with views of the Connecticut River. I was shown to a conference room where David Chen waited alongside Thornmere's CEO, Elizabeth Norton, and a woman introduced as Vanessa Washington, head of internal audit. Thank you for coming, Ms. Sullivan, Elizabeth began after pleasantries were exchanged. I'll get straight to the point. We've been following the Fairview situation with great interest, and frankly, we're impressed by your integrity. David nodded in agreement. In the current regulatory environment, companies like ours are under intense scrutiny. We need someone with both technical expertise and moral courage leading our compliance efforts. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Compliance Officer, Elizabeth continued. The role would report directly to me, with full board access and a substantial budget for staffing your department as you see fit. The offer was unexpected, not just a job but a C-suite position with significantly more authority and compensation than I had ever had at Fairview. At 52, such opportunities were rare. That's very generous, I replied carefully. May I ask what prompted such a substantial offer to someone you've just met? Elizabeth and David exchanged glances. Honesty, Elizabeth admitted. Fear. Not of you, but of being the next Fairview. The regulatory landscape is changing, and we need someone who can ensure we're not just compliant on paper. Also, Vanessa added, speaking for the first time, I reviewed your work when we competed with Fairview on the Westridge Development Project last year. Your financial models were impeccable. Talent like yours is rare. Their transparency was refreshing, but something still felt off. The offer was too perfect, too quickly extended to someone at the center of an ongoing scandal. Before I consider your offer, I said, I need to ask a difficult question. What is Thornmere's relationship with Redwood Capital Partners? The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Elizabeth's smile faltered ever so slightly, while David's posture stiffened. They're a minority investor in some of our development projects, Elizabeth answered carefully. Why do you ask? Because I've received information suggesting Redwood may be linked to the same financial irregularities I uncovered at Fairview, I replied, watching their reactions closely. And I've recently received what could be interpreted as a threat, warning me to stop investigating. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression grave. What kind of threat? I showed them the anonymous text message. This is concerning, David said after a moment. But I'm not sure what it has to do with our job offer. Everything, I counted. If I were to accept this position, I would need complete independence to investigate any potential issues, regardless of who they involve, including major investors. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment before responding. Maggie, let me be candid. We're offering you this position because we want to ensure Thornmere doesn't become the next financial scandal headline. If you have concerns about Redwood, that's something we should know about. Or, I suggested, you already know about Redwood's practices, and you're offering me this position to keep me close and controlled. The silence that followed was telling. I think we're done here, I said, gathering my belongings. Thank you for your time. As I walked toward the elevator, David caught up to me. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. We genuinely need someone like you. Then prove it, I replied. Start by ordering a full internal audit of any projects involving Redwood, conducted by an independent firm with no ties to either company. When that's complete, we can talk again. I stepped into the elevator, leaving David looking thoughtful in the hallway. As the doors closed, I couldn't help but wonder, was I turning down a legitimate opportunity, or had I just narrowly avoided walking into a trap set by the very people I was now investigating? The vindication. The second investigation moved with surprising speed. 6 weeks after my initial whistleblower report, I sat in a federal building conference room alongside my attorney, Sarah Goldman, watching as Special Agent Diaz laid out the charges being filed against Fairview's former executives. Richard Parker and James Harrison will be charged with securities fraud, filing false financial statements, and conspiracy, he explained. Based largely on the evidence you provided, Ms. Sullivan. Sarah nodded approvingly. And the board members? I asked. 2 board members, including former chair Catherine Montgomery, are being charged with failure to perform fiduciary duties and willful blindness, Agent Diaz continued. The investigation into Redwood Capital is ongoing and complex. I understood the subtext. Redwood had powerful connections and armies of attorneys. That investigation would take much longer and face significant resistance. What happens now? I asked. Now we prepare for depositions and potential trial testimony, Sarah explained. And you consider what you want your next steps to be professionally. That question had been weighing on me. I had received no shortage of job offers. But after the Thornmere experience, I was wary of walking into another potentially compromised situation. Agent Diaz slid a business card across the table. When you're ready, there's someone at the Financial Crimes Division who would like to speak with you about a consulting role. Your expertise would be valuable. I took the card, surprised. Working with federal regulators hadn't occurred to me, but it made a certain kind of sense. Who better to help catch financial criminals than someone who had exposed them from the inside? As we left the building, Sarah handed me a folder. The final whistleblower award determination came through. The SEC is awarding you 15% of the penalties assessed against Fairview. I opened the folder and nearly stumbled on the steps. The figure was staggering. Over $2 million. That's substantial, I managed. Sarah smiled. That's what happens when you expose a fraud worth hundreds of millions. Congratulations, Maggie. You did the right thing. And for once, it actually paid off. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to feel something close to vindication. That evening, I called Ryan to share the news. Mom, that's incredible, he said when I told him about the award and the consultant offer. I'm so proud of you. His words meant more to me than all the money in that folder. Epilogue. 1 year later. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of a corporate ethics conference, surveying the room filled with financial professionals, regulators, and compliance officers. My keynote speech on ethical accounting in the age of pressure had drawn an unexpectedly large audience. The pressure to compromise doesn't arrive all at once, I told them. It begins with small requests, rationalizations, and a culture that prioritizes results over methods. By the time someone asks you to commit outright fraud, you've often already been conditioned to say yes. In the front row sat my team from the newly established consulting firm I had founded 6 months earlier, Integrity Financial Advisory. Using my whistleblower award as seed capital, I had created a practice specializing in forensic accounting and ethical compliance systems. Real integrity isn't just saying no to fraud, I continued. It's creating systems where ethical behavior is rewarded and transparency is the default, not the exception. After the speech, as I mingled with attendees, a familiar face approached. Jessica Martinez, my former assistant from Fairview. That was amazing, she said, hugging me. Though I'm a bit biased since I work for the speaker. I smiled. Hiring Jessica as my firm's operations director had been one of my first decisions. Her loyalty during the Fairview scandal had proven her character beyond doubt, and as a single mother to 4-year-old Sophia, she needed a workplace that valued both her professional skills and her personal commitments. How are the new clients coming along? I asked. We just signed Oakland Technologies, she replied. That makes 14 clients in 6 months. We're going to need more staff. We'll find them, I assured her. The right people who value integrity over convenience. As we chatted, I noticed Richard Parker's name trending on my phone's news alerts. The headline was succinct. Former Fairview CFO sentenced to 8 years for securities fraud. I felt no joy at his downfall, only a quiet confirmation that the system sometimes worked as it should. Justice, like proper accounting, had finally balanced its books. My phone buzzed with a text message from Ryan. Saw the news about Parker. You did it, Mom. You taught me what integrity looks like in action, not just words. That evening, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the city, I reflected on the journey of the past year. My revenge hadn't been about destroying careers or seeking personal vindication. It had been about truth, showing that in the world of finance, as in life, integrity is the only currency that never devalues. In the wake of the scandal, I had not only rebuilt my career, but transformed it into something more meaningful. While Fairview struggled to recover under new leadership, I was helping other companies avoid similar fates. And most importantly, I had lived up to the values I had taught my son. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but building something better from the ashes of what they took from you. And at 53, I had discovered that it's never too late to start again.